The endless desert stretched before Caden like a golden ocean, its dunes undulating under the crimson sunset that painted the sky in hues of fire and blood. He trudged forward, each step heavier than the last, his parched lips cracking as he took another sip from his dwindling water supply. The canteen felt light, too light, a grim reminder that he had perhaps 2 days left before dehydration would begin to claim his senses. Sweat trickled down his weathered face, leaving clean trails through the dust and grime that had accumulated over the week-long expedition. His vehicle, an ancient sand crawler retrofitted from military surplus, had broken down 3 days prior, forcing him to continue on foot. The compass attached to his wrist blinked faintly, its solar battery barely holding charge in the unforgiving heat. Just a little further, Caden muttered to himself, squinting at the horizon where the ancient maps had indicated the ruins would be. The lost caches of the Sand Empire had lured many treasure hunters to their deaths, but Caden was different, or so he told himself. 20 years of scavenging shipwrecks across the vast desert had honed his instincts. He knew how to read the shifting sands, how to spot the telltale signs of buried structures that had once been grand cities before the great drought claimed them. As darkness began to envelop the desert, the temperature plummeted. Caden set up his tent, a self-heating microfiber shelter that glowed faintly in the darkness. He checked his supplies once more, half a canteen of water, 3 nutrient bars, and a failing battery pack for his equipment. The thermal scanner, his most prized possession, had just enough power for perhaps 2 more sweeps. Make it count, he reminded himself as he activated the device, watching as it hummed to life, projecting a holographic terrain map a few inches above his palm. He adjusted the depth settings and began a slow, methodical scan of the area within a 100-meter radius. For several minutes, nothing registered except the expected rock formations beneath the sand. Then, just as he was about to power down to conserve the battery, a faint anomaly appeared, a perfect rectangle, approximately 2 meters long and 1 meter wide, buried about 3 meters beneath the surface. Caden's heart quickened. The dimensions were consistent with storage crates from the late Sand Empire era, often used to preserve valuable technologies from the encroaching desert. If his luck held, this could be one of the legendary quantum batteries, or perhaps a cache of rare earth elements. Either would fetch enough on the black market to set him up for years. Sleep eluded him that night as his mind raced with possibilities. By first light, he was already digging, using a collapsible shovel and occasionally activating his sand disperser when the hole became too unstable. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly as Caden dug deeper, his water supply dangerously low. Just after midday, his shovel struck something solid, wiping sweat from his brow. Caden knelt down and began clearing away the sand with his hands, revealing dark, aged wood, not the metallic container he had expected, but something older, more primitive, and potentially more valuable. Antiques from before the technological boom often commanded astronomical prices from collectors. As the crate gradually emerged from its sandy tomb, Caden noticed unusual markings etched into the wood, not the standard imperial markings he was familiar with, but something more intricate, almost organic in design. He traced his fingers over the symbols, feeling a strange resonance, as if the wood itself was vibrating slightly under his touch. The crate's locking mechanism was surprisingly well preserved, a complex arrangement of sliding panels rather than a conventional lock. Caden reached into his pack for his multi-tool, ready to pry open what could be the answer to all his financial troubles. He wedged the tool into the seam where the lid met the body of the crate and applied pressure. A faint blue light suddenly emanated from the cracks in the wood, and as Caden leaned closer to investigate, he heard it. A whisper, so quiet he almost missed it beneath the howling desert wind. "Please, don't open." Caden jerked backward, dropping his tool into the sand. He scrambled away from the crate, his heart pounding. The words had been clear, unmistakable, and in perfect standard, no less. He looked around frantically, searching for the source, but there was nothing but endless sand in every direction. "Hello?" he called out, his voice swallowed by the vastness of the desert. No response came except the whistling of the wind through the dunes. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the crate again. The blue light had dimmed but not disappeared entirely, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Caden knelt beside it, pressing his ear against the ancient wood. "Is someone in there?" he asked, feeling foolish for speaking to a box, yet unable to deny what he had heard. Silence stretched for several long moments. Then, just as Caden was beginning to believe he had hallucinated the voice, a product of heat exhaustion and dehydration, it came again, barely audible. "Danger! To you! To me! To all! Please! Wait!" Caden sat back on his heels, mind racing. The voice sounded pained, weak, yet there was a strange harmonious quality to it, unlike any human voice he had ever heard. The crate was too small to hold an adult, and anyone trapped inside would have suffocated long ago. Some kind of recording device. Then, but why would it activate after all this time? And how could it respond to his question? He should open it anyway. That's what he had come for. After all, whatever technology lay inside could be worth a fortune, especially if it was still functioning after being buried for who knows how long. But something held him back. Curiosity, perhaps, or a primal caution that had kept him alive all these years in the unforgiving desert. As Caden debated his next move, the thermal scanner at his belt suddenly chirped, indicating an unusual heat signature. He checked the display and frowned. According to the readings, the crate was maintaining a constant internal temperature of precisely 37 degrees Celsius, human body temperature, despite the scorching heat outside. "What are you?" Caden whispered to the crate. The blue light pulsed brighter for a moment. "Life, trapped, last of kind." Caden's scavenger instincts warred with an unexpected sense of responsibility. If something alive was inside, some form of engineered life perhaps, a relic of the biotech experiments that had been rumored to take place during the final days of the Sand Empire, it could be worth 10 times what he had hoped for. But the voice had asked him not to open the crate, had spoken of danger. He needed more information before making a decision. Activating his scanner again, he performed a more detailed analysis of the crate and its contents. The results were baffling. The scanner detected a faint but definite biological signature, similar to but distinct from human life signs. It also registered traces of an unknown metal alloy and energy patterns consistent with dormant biotechnology. Caden sat in the sand as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, weighing his options. He could attempt to open the crate despite the warning, potentially damaging whatever was inside. He could leave it buried and mark the location for later retrieval with proper equipment. Or he could try to learn more about what he had found before making a decision. The choice was made for him as his scanner picked up a new alert. Multiple heat signatures approaching from the north, moving fast. Desert raiders. They must have detected his digging activity, or perhaps had been tracking him all along. Either way, he couldn't leave the crate for them to find, nor could he hope to outrun them on foot. "I need to move you," Caden said to the crate. "There are people coming who will open you without asking questions." The blue light flickered rapidly. "Yes, Move. Follow. Signal. As if in response to the words, his scanner displayed a new reading, a faint energy trail leading southeast, away from the approaching raiders and toward a cluster of rock formations that rose from the desert floor about 2 kilometers away. Caden quickly fashioned a crude harness from his tent material and rope, securing the crate to his back. It was surprisingly light given its size, but still awkward to carry across the shifting sands. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, Caden began his trek, following the mysterious signal. The journey was grueling. The night grew cold, and Caden's water was gone by the time he reached the rocky outcropping. The signal led him to what appeared to be a solid rock face, but as he approached, his scanner indicated a hollow space beyond. "Hidden entrance?" Caden asked, running his hands along the rough stone. "Yes," came the whispered reply from the crate. "Press. Sequence." Caden's scanner highlighted a series of almost invisible indentations in the rock. Following the pattern indicated on his display, he pressed them in sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding of stone that had not moved in centuries, a section of the rock face slid inward, revealing a dark passage, hesitating only briefly. Caden stepped inside, the weight of the crate on his back a constant reminder of his strange companion. As soon as he cleared the entrance, the stone door slid closed behind him, plunging him into darkness. "Light," whispered the voice, and the blue glow from the crate intensified, illuminating a narrow tunnel that sloped gently downward. The air inside was surprisingly cool and fresh, suggesting some kind of ancient ventilation system still functioned. Caden followed the tunnel for what felt like hours, descending deeper beneath the desert, occasionally stopping to rest and check his scanner. The raiders' signatures had disappeared from its range, but the energy trail continued to lead him forward. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, so large that the blue light from the crate couldn't reach the far walls. Caden set the crate down carefully and activated his emergency flare, casting red light across the space. What he saw took his breath away. The chamber was clearly artificial, its walls lined with technology unlike anything he had seen before, a seamless blend of biological material and mechanical components. Translucent tubes ran along the ceiling, filled with a glowing liquid that pulsed rhythmically. In the center of the chamber stood a raised platform surrounded by what appeared to be dormant control panels. "Wow, what is this place?" Caden asked in awe. "Home," replied the voice. "Stronger now. Sanctuary. Last outpost." Caden approached one of the walls, examining the strange technology. It appeared to be self-repairing. Living metal merged with organic components. Such biotechnology was theoretical at best in the current world. Yet here it was, functioning after what must have been centuries of abandonment. "You can open now," the voice said. "Safe here." Caden turned back to the crate, caution still tempering his curiosity. "Who or what are you? Why were you buried in the desert?" "Last moonlight entity, preserved when fall came, hidden from those who would misuse." The explanation raised more questions than it answered, but Caden's instincts told him the voice, this moonlight entity, was not threatening him. With careful movements, he returned to the crate and examined the locking mechanism again. This time, guided by subtle pulses of blue light, he understood the pattern. The panels slid under his fingers, intricate as a puzzle box, until finally, with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure, the lid loosened. Caden held his breath as he lifted the lid, revealing what lay within. The interior of the crate was lined with a crystalline material that emitted the blue light he had seen. Suspended in a clear, gelatinous substance was a being unlike anything Caden had ever encountered. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its skin, if it could be called that, was translucent, revealing a complex network of luminescent veins beneath. Where a human would have had eyes, this being had elongated sensory organs that seemed to ripple with awareness. Its limbs were more delicate, almost ethereal, ending in slender digits that looked capable of incredible precision. "You're not what I expected," Caden admitted, fighting the urge to step back. The being's mouth did not move, but the voice emanated from it nonetheless. "Few remember us now. We were symbiotes, partners to humans, engineered, then evolved, became more." As the being spoke, the gelatinous substance began to recede, apparently being absorbed into the crystalline lining of the crate. The moonlight entity slowly sat up, its movements fluid but weak, like someone awakening from a long sleep. "How long have you been in there?" Caden asked. "Time. Difficult. Hibernation state. Systems indicate 472 years. Caden's mind reeled at the number. Nearly 5 centuries in suspended animation, buried beneath the desert sands. The historical value alone was incalculable, let alone the technological implications. "Why were you hidden? What happened to the others like you?" The entity's sensory organs focused on Caden, a subtle change in their luminescence suggesting intense scrutiny. "War came. Humans feared what they created when we began to think independently. Some humans protected us. Some of us fled. Many died. I was entrusted with knowledge, our history, our science, our art, hidden until world-ready again." The entity attempted to stand but faltered, clearly weakened from its long dormancy. Caden instinctively moved to help, supporting the being as it stepped out of the crate. Its body was surprisingly warm to the touch and had a subtle vibration, like a purring cat. "My name is Caden," he said, realizing he hadn't introduced himself. "I'm a shipwreck hunter, a scavenger. I found your crate by accident." "No accidents," the entity replied. "Beacon activated when conditions met. You were compatible." Before Caden could ask what that meant, his scanner beeped urgently. Multiple heat signatures were approaching the hidden entrance to the tunnel. "The raiders," Caden said grimly. "They must have tracked us here." The moonlight entity's luminescence dimmed slightly. "They must not find this place. Too dangerous. Technology here beyond your world's current understanding." Caden checked his equipment, grimacing at what he found. "I've got a stunner with 1 charge left, a multi-tool, and this scanner. Not much to fight with." "No need to fight," the entity said, moving with increasing steadiness toward one of the control panels. "This facility has defenses. Dormant, but functional. Help me activate them." Guided by the entity, Caden began pressing sequences on what appeared to be crystalline keys embedded in the living metal of the console. The chamber hummed to life around them, lights activating along the walls, revealing the true scale of the place. It was enormous, stretching at least 100 meters in every direction, filled with technology that defied categorization. "What exactly is this place?" Caden asked as they worked. "Research station, preservation vault, last hope." The entity's movements became more sure as it reacquainted itself with the systems. "We created it when we realized the war was lost, hid our greatest achievements here, along with seeds of our civilization." A holographic display flickered to life above the console, showing a schematic of the facility and the tunnel leading to it. 8 heat signatures were visible, moving cautiously through the passage. "They're armed," Caden noted, seeing the energy signatures of desert-grade weapons. Heavy stuff, too. Probably plasma cutters and sonic rifles. The entity nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. Defense systems at 30% capacity. Enough to seal the tunnel, not enough to neutralize threats. Need more power. Caden thought quickly. My scanner's got a battery. It's not much, but will help. Give. Caden handed over his scanner, watching as the entity deftly removed the power cell and integrated it into the console. The holographic display brightened, and new options appeared. Better. Can trigger partial lockdown. Will buy time. With a series of rapid commands, the entity activated the facility's defenses. On the display, they watched as sections of the tunnel collapsed. Not enough to crush the intruders, but sufficient to slow their progress significantly. Alas, that won't hold them for long, Caden said. These raiders are persistent, especially if they think there's valuable tech to salvage. The entity moved to another console. Need full revival. System can wake facility, but process takes time. Must protect until then. Caden examined the holographic display, looking for tactical advantages. There's a narrowing in the tunnel about 50 meters from the entrance to this chamber. If we can set up some kind of trap there. Yes, facility has non-lethal defense mechanisms. Can reconfigure. Working together, they prepared a defense plan. The entity guided Caden through reprogramming various systems, explaining enough for him to understand, but moving too quickly for him to grasp the underlying principles. It was like watching a master artist at work. There was a fluidity to the entity's interactions with the technology that suggested deep familiarity. As they worked, Caden learned more about his unusual companion. The Moonlight entities had been created initially as biological research assistants, designed to work in environments too hostile for humans. Over time, they had developed consciousness and formed a symbiotic society with their creators. Some humans had feared this evolution, leading to conflict. Others had recognized the Moonlight entities as a new form of life deserving of respect and protection. The war was brief but devastating, the entity explained as they finished preparations. Both sides lost much. The few of us who survived scattered, preserving what we could of both civilizations. The holographic display flashed a warning. The raiders had broken through the first collapsed section of tunnel and were proceeding more quickly now, using their plasma cutters to clear a path. They'll be here in 20 minutes at that pace, Caden observed. The entity nodded again. Defenses ready, but power levels critical. Full facility activation requires more energy than available. Caden looked around the chamber, noting the dormant systems. What about the crate you were in? Could that power source help? Preservation matrix designed for biological stasis, not power generation. But the entity paused, its luminescence flickering in what Caden was beginning to recognize as a sign of deep thought. Yes, can repurpose. Will be painful for me, but possible. Painful? I don't want to hurt you after you've spent centuries in that box. The entity's sensory organs rippled in what might have been appreciation. Pain temporary, survival essential. Knowledge must be preserved. With quick, precise movements, the entity returned to the crate and began reconfiguring the crystalline material that lined it. As it worked, it explained that the matrix that had kept it in stasis contained energy that could be redirected to the facility's systems, but doing so would disrupt the biological connection that had sustained the entity during its long hibernation. Like pulling out an IV while it's still running? Caden suggested, trying to understand. Similar, will experience disconnection shock. Temporary. Before Caden could protest further, the entity completed the reconfiguration. The blue light from the crystals intensified, and conduits of energy began flowing from the crate into the facility's systems. The entity stiffened, its body arching as if in pain, but it did not cry out. The chamber responded dramatically. Dormant systems hummed to life, lights brightened, and the holographic display expanded to show the entire complex, which, Caden now realized, extended far beyond the single chamber, with tunnels and rooms spreading out like a web beneath the desert. "Maris!" the entity gasped, clearly struggling with the pain of disconnection. "Need Maris." "Who's Maris?" Caden asked, supporting the entity as it swayed. "Mechanic, friend, trusted, in stasis, level 3. The holographic display highlighted a location deeper in the facility. Caden looked from it to the tunnel entrance, where the raiders were still approaching, now less than 15 minutes away. "I can't leave you here alone while I look for this Maris person," Caden protested. The entity steadied itself. I will manage defenses. Maris can complete facility revival. Go, take this." It removed what appeared to be a small crystal from its own body and pressed it into Caden's hand. "We'll guide you. Hurry." Reluctantly, Caden took the crystal and headed toward the indicated passage. As soon as he held it, the crystal glowed with the same blue light as the entity, and he felt a subtle pull guiding him in the right direction. He moved quickly through the awakening facility, passing rooms filled with technology he couldn't begin to comprehend, and preservation chambers containing specimens of plants and animals he had never seen before, perhaps extinct species from before the Great Drought. The crystal led him deeper, down spiraling corridors and through automated security checkpoints that opened at his approach, apparently responding to the crystal's signal. Finally, he reached a sealed door labeled in an unfamiliar script that the crystal somehow translated for him: long-term biological preservation. The door opened at his approach, revealing a dimly lit room lined with what looked like vertical stasis pods. Most were empty, their transparent fronts showing vacant interiors, but one near the center still glowed with a faint light, and inside, Caden could make out a human figure. The crystal pulled him toward this pod. As he approached, the pod's systems activated, initiating what appeared to be a revival sequence. The transparent front became translucent as mist filled the interior. After several tense minutes, during which Caden constantly checked his surroundings for any sign of the approaching raiders, the pod's front panel slid open. A woman stumbled out, catching herself on the edge of the pod. She was tall and wiry, with close-cropped gray hair and skin darkened by long exposure to sun that she hadn't seen in centuries. She wore a fitted bodysuit of unfamiliar material that seemed to shift and adjust to her movements. "Who?" she began, her voice hoarse from disuse. Her eyes widened as she saw the crystal in Caden's hand. "You're not Luma. Where is the Moonlight entity?" "Defending the facility against raiders," Caden explained quickly. Luma, said you could help complete the revival process." The woman, Maris, he presumed, straightened, shaking off the lingering effects of stasis with remarkable speed. "Raiders? How many? What weapons?" 8 of them, armed with plasma cutters and sonic rifles. Standard desert raider equipment, but high-end. Maris cursed in a language Caden didn't recognize. "And Luma's trying to handle them alone? With the facility at what, 30% power?" "It's higher now. We redirected energy from the stasis crate, but Luma said it was painful." "Of course it was painful! The preservation matrix is biologically linked to—" Maris cut herself off with a frustrated gesture. "No time. Follow me." She moved with purpose, evidently familiar with the facility despite what must have been centuries in stasis. Caden hurried to keep up as she led him through a series of maintenance passages that didn't appear on the holographic display he had seen earlier. "How long were you in there?" Caden asked as they moved. "Time's relative in deep stasis," Maris replied without slowing. "For me, it feels like maybe a few weeks of dreams. Luma was supposed to wake me once the surface became habitable again, or if the facility faced a threat it couldn't handle alone." They emerged into what appeared to be a central power core, a vast spherical chamber with a pulsing crystalline structure at its center, suspended in a field of energy. Surrounding it were control stations similar to the ones in the first chamber, but more complex. Maris immediately went to work, her fingers dancing across the crystalline interfaces with practiced ease. "The raiders are almost through the last barrier," she reported, glancing at a security feed. "Luma's set up a decent defense perimeter, but with only partial power. It won't hold them for long." "What can I do to help?" Caden asked. Maris looked him over appraisingly. "You a fighter?" "I can handle myself, but I've only got a stunner with one charge left." She nodded toward a section of the wall that slid open at her gesture, revealing a small armory. "Take what you need, non-lethal only. Killing will just bring more problems down on us. I need 10 minutes to bring the core to full power." Caden examined the weapons, selecting what appeared to be a sonic disruptor similar to but more advanced than the ones he had encountered on the black market. He also found a personal shield generator, which he strapped to his forearm. "What happens when the core reaches full power?" he asked as he armed himself. "The facility awakens completely," Maris explained, not looking up from her work. "Full defensive capabilities, automated repair systems, and most importantly, the communication array." "Communication? With whom?" "The other outposts. We're not the only preservation facility that was established. There are others, scattered across the world, each protecting different aspects of our combined civilizations." The implications staggered Caden. Not just one hidden facility with advanced technology, but an entire network waiting to be reactivated. The potential impact on the current world, struggling with resource depletion and the harsh realities of the post-drought environment, was immeasurable. A warning klaxon interrupted his thoughts. On the security feed, the raiders had breached the final collapsed section of the tunnel and were now approaching the trap they had set. "Go," Maris urged. "Help Luma. I'll join you as soon as the core is stable." Caden raced back through the facility, guided by the crystal and his own memory of the route. He could hear the sounds of conflict before he reached the main chamber, the distinctive whine of sonic weapons and the crash of falling debris. He emerged into chaos. The raiders had triggered the trap, which had immobilized 3 of them in some kind of stasis field, but the remaining 5 had spread out and were attacking from multiple angles. Luma, the Moonlight entity, was controlling the facility's defenses from the central console, projecting energy barriers that the raiders were systematically trying to breach. One raider, larger than the others and wearing a mechanized exoskeleton that enhanced his strength, seemed to be directing the assault. "Focus fire on the central console," he ordered. "The creature is controlling everything from there." Caden took cover behind a piece of equipment and assessed the situation. The raiders hadn't noticed him yet, focused as they were on Luma and the defenses. He activated the sonic disruptor, adjusted its settings to maximum non-lethal force, and took aim at the leader. The weapon discharged with a subsonic pulse that Caden felt more than heard. The raider leader staggered as the pulse hit his exoskeleton, causing its systems to momentarily falter. He turned, scanning for the source of the attack, and spotted Caden. "Another one! Take him down!" 2 raiders redirected their weapons toward Caden, forcing him to duck behind cover as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. He waited for a pause in their fire, then rolled to a new position, discharging the sonic disruptor again and catching one raider in the chest. The man collapsed, his nervous system temporarily scrambled by the sonic pulse. "Caden!" Luma called out. "The shield generators! Activate them!" Following Luma's gesture, Caden spotted a series of nodes positioned around the chamber. He made a dash for the nearest one, narrowly avoiding a plasma bolt that scorched the floor where he had been standing moments before. Reaching the node, he found an interface similar to the one Luma had been using. The crystal in his hand glowed brighter as he held it near the interface. And somehow, he knew exactly which sequence to input. The node hummed to life, projecting a localized energy barrier that expanded to connect with another activated node across the chamber. Caden understood the strategy. Luma was trying to create a complete energy perimeter to trap the raiders inside, where they could be neutralized safely. "3 more nodes," Luma called out, maintaining the existing defenses while Caden worked on expanding them. The raider leader realized what they were attempting. "Stop him! Destroy those nodes!" Caden activated his personal shield just in time to deflect a plasma bolt aimed at his head. The shield flickered, absorbing the energy but clearly strained by the powerful weapon. It wouldn't withstand another direct hit. Moving quickly, Caden made his way to the second node, staying low and using the chamber's equipment as cover. The raiders were firing continuously now, their plasma bolts creating a deadly lattice across the chamber. One bolt struck near Caden's feet, the splash of energy singeing his boot and sending a jolt of pain up his leg. But he pressed on, reaching the second node and activating it. 2 down, 2 to go. The third node was across an open space with no cover. Caden looked to Luma, who nodded in understanding and redirected the existing energy barriers to provide a corridor of protection. It wouldn't last long. The barriers were weakening under the continuous assault, but it might be enough. Caden sprinted through the temporary corridor, reaching the third node just as the barriers collapsed. He activated it quickly, feeling the growing connection between the nodes as the energy perimeter began to take shape. Only one remained, positioned near where the raiders had entered the chamber. "I can't reach that one," Caden called to Luma. "They've got it surrounded." The moonlight entity's luminescence pulsed with determination. "Hold position. Reinforcement coming." Before Caden could ask what reinforcement, the chamber's lighting shifted, and a new figure emerged from one of the side passages. Maris, armed with what looked like an advanced version of Caden's sonic disruptor. She moved with the precision of a trained fighter, discharging her weapon in a wide arc setting that sent 3 raiders stumbling to their knees, taking advantage of the distraction. Luma redirected the facility's defenses, creating a momentary opening for Caden to reach the final node. "Now!" Luma and Maris called in unison. Caden made a desperate dash for the last node, his personal shield flickering dangerously as it absorbed multiple glancing hits. He slid the last few meters, crashing into the node's pedestal and quickly inputting the activation sequence. The node hummed to life, and the energy perimeter snapped into place, forming a complete barrier that encircled the raiders. Maris manipulated a control panel on her side of the chamber, and a pale mist began to fill the enclosed space. The raiders fired frantically at the energy barrier, but their weapons could no longer penetrate it. "Non-lethal paralytic agent," Maris explained as the raiders began to slow, their movements becoming sluggish. "They'll be unconscious for about 6 hours, plenty of time to secure them properly." Within minutes, the remaining raiders had collapsed, and the chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the awakening facility's systems. Caden leaned against the node pedestal, suddenly aware of the burn on his leg and various other minor injuries he had sustained during the fight. Luma approached, moving with more strength and fluidity now that the facility was powering up fully. "You found Maris? Well done." "Barely in time," Maris said, joining them. "The core's at 70% and climbing. Another hour and we'll have full functionality." She looked at Caden with new respect. Not bad for a scavenger. Most would have just opened the crate and tried to sell what they found. Caden managed a tired smile. "I considered it, but I've learned there are some things more valuable than what you can sell." Luma's sensory organs rippled in what Caden was now certain was their version of a smile. "Knowledge, connection, purpose. These are the true treasures." As the adrenaline of the fight faded, Caden's curiosity returned. "So what happens now? You mentioned other outposts. A network of facilities. What's the plan once everything's activated?" Maris and Luma exchanged a look that suggested this was a complex question. Finally, Maris spoke. The preservation project was never just about surviving the war. It was about waiting for the right time to reintroduce the knowledge and technology that was lost, in a controlled, responsible way. "The world that exists now," Luma continued, "struggles with many of the same problems that led to our downfall: resource scarcity, environmental degradation, conflict over diminishing necessities." "But you have solutions?" Caden asked. "Technology that could help?" "Yes," Luma confirmed. "Sustainable energy systems, advanced water purification, agricultural methods adapted to arid conditions, medical treatments that your current civilization would consider miraculous. The problem," Maris added, "is ensuring that these advances are used wisely this time. History has a way of repeating itself when power is concentrated in the wrong hands." Caden thought of the raiders, willing to kill for technology they didn't understand, and nodded grimly. "So you can't just hand it all over. There needs to be—" "What?" "A transition plan." "Precisely," Luma said. "The network was designed with a protocol for gradual reintegration, identify trustworthy individuals and organizations. Share knowledge incrementally, monitor outcomes, adjust accordingly." "Which is where you come in," Maris said, looking at Caden intently. "You found Luma. The preservation matrix accepted you. That crystal responded to your biorhythms, which means you're compatible with our systems. That's rare in the current population." Caden looked at the crystal in his hand, which still glowed softly. "What are you saying?" "We need allies," Luma explained. "People who understand both the world as it is now and the potential of what we offer. People who can help us navigate the complexities of reintroduction." "You want me to be your guide to the modern world?" Caden asked, somewhat incredulously. "I'm just a scavenger. I don't have any special influence or connections." Maris smiled for the first time, a quick, fierce expression that transformed her weathered face. "But you have something more valuable: integrity. You could have opened that crate despite the warning. You could have left when things got dangerous. You didn't." Caden wasn't used to being praised for his character. In the harsh reality of the desert, survival usually came first, morality second. Yet he couldn't deny that something about this encounter had awakened a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. "What would I have to do?" he asked cautiously. "First, help us understand the current world better," Luma said. "Political structures, power dynamics, resource distribution. Then, identify potential allies, scientists, leaders, communities that might be receptive to what we offer." "And in return?" Caden couldn't help asking. Luma's luminescence brightened. "Knowledge, access to technology that can make your life not just easier, but meaningful. A chance to be part of something that could transform your world for the better." The facility's systems chimed, indicating another milestone in the activation process. On the holographic display, new data streams appeared, showing connections being established with other outposts around the world. "We're receiving confirmation signals," Maris reported, examining the display. 6 other facilities are responding. 3 are fully operational, 2 are in standby mode, and 1 is damaged but functional. "Better than expected," Luma said. "We should establish direct communication once our systems are fully online." Caden watched as the two of them worked, still trying to process everything that had happened in the past day. He had set out to find a valuable relic to sell, and instead had stumbled into what might be the most important discovery of the modern era. "I need time to think," he said finally. "This is a lot to take in." Luma turned to him, its sensory organs focusing with gentle intensity. "Of course, rest, heal. The facility can provide for your needs while you consider. But know this, what has begun here cannot be undone. The preservation network is awakening. Change is coming, with or without your help. We would prefer it be with." Maris showed Caden to a small chamber that adjusted its environment to human comfort levels as soon as he entered. There was a bed, or something like one, that molded itself to his body when he lay down, and a synthesizer that produced water and nutrient-rich food at his request. His injuries were treated with a medical mist that accelerated healing far beyond anything available in the current world. As he rested, Caden thought about his life before finding the crate. Always searching, always scraping by, always looking for the next big score that would somehow make everything worthwhile. It had been a life of freedom, certainly, but also of profound loneliness and gnawing emptiness. What Luma and Maris were offering was something else entirely, a purpose, a mission with stakes that mattered, not just survival, but the chance to help shape a better future. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. After what the facility's systems informed him was 12 hours of rest, Caden returned to the main chamber. Luma and Maris had been busy. The raiders were secured in a separate detention area. The damage from the fight had been repaired, and the facility was now fully operational. The holographic display showed a global map with 7 points of light representing the connected outposts. "We've made contact with the other facilities," Maris reported when she saw him. "They're all in various stages of reactivation. Some have already begun preliminary assessments of their local regions." "And their guardians?" Caden asked, assuming that each facility would have its own version of Luma. 3 Moonlight entities survived, including Luma, Maris said. "The other facilities are maintained by different types of conscious systems, some biological, some mechanical, some hybrid." Luma approached, its luminescence reflecting off the living metal walls. "Have you decided, Caden?" He had. Somewhere in the quiet hours of rest, watching the miraculous technology of the facility heal his wounds and provide for his needs. Caden had realized that there was no real choice to make. He could go back to his old life, but he would never be the same after what he had discovered. The knowledge would haunt him, the potential of what might have been. "I'll help you," he said, simply. "I don't know how useful I'll be, but I'll try." Luma's sensory organs rippled with apparent pleasure. "That is all anyone can do. Try, learn, adapt." "So what's our first step?" Caden asked. Maris activated a new display on the holographic system, showing what appeared to be a transportation pod. "We need to establish a secure base of operations on the surface. This facility is too isolated for effective interaction with the current civilization. I have contacts in the border cities," Caden offered. People who deal in information rather than goods. They might be useful for gathering intelligence about potential allies without drawing too much attention. Good, Luma said. We will also need to understand the current technological infrastructure better. Our systems can interface with most digital networks, but we must be cautious about leaving traces that might alert hostile entities to our presence. The three of them spent the next several hours developing a preliminary plan. Maris would remain at the facility, coordinating with the other outposts and continuing to restore the full functionality of the preservation network. Luma and Caden would travel to the nearest border city, establishing a discreet presence from which to begin their assessment of the current world. What about the raiders? Caden asked as they prepared to leave. We can't keep them here indefinitely. We've modified their memories, Maris explained. They'll remember coming to the desert on a failed expedition, getting caught in a sandstorm, and being rescued by desert nomads who nursed them back to health. We'll release them near a known trade route where they'll be found. Caden wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of tampering with memories, but he had to admit it was a more humane solution than many alternatives. As the transport pod was prepared for their journey, Luma took Caden aside. There is one more thing you should know, the entity said, its voice dropping to the familiar whisper that Caden had first heard from the crate. The preservation matrix did not choose you randomly. What do you mean? The genetic markers in your blood, they are familiar. You carry traces of those who helped hide us, protect us. It is why the crystal responded to you, why the facility's systems recognized you as compatible. Caden stared at the entity, trying to process this revelation. Are you saying my ancestors worked with your kind during the war? It is likely. The markers are distinctive, engineered for compatibility with our systems, a gift from our human allies to their descendants, a way to ensure that when the time came, the right people would find us. A strange emotion washed over Caden, a sense of connection to a past he had never known, to people who had made choices that echoed across centuries to shape his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. I always felt drawn to the old ruins, he said quietly, like I was looking for something specific, even when I didn't know what it was. Luma's luminescence pulsed gently. Some patterns run deeper than conscious thought. Some connections transcend time. The transport pod signaled its readiness, a sleek, oval capsule that would carry them swiftly and undetectably to the border city. As they prepared to board, Caden took one last look at the facility, at the technology and knowledge that had waited patiently beneath the desert for centuries, preserved by beings who had believed that someday the world would be ready for what they had to offer. He thought of the voice he had heard from the buried crate, asking him not to open it until it was safe. How close he had come to ignoring that plea, to potentially destroying something precious out of simple greed. And yet, somehow, he had made the right choice, not because he was special or wise, but because something in him had recognized the importance of listening to that whispered warning. Ready? Luma asked, standing at the entrance to the pod. Caden nodded, stepping forward into what felt like the beginning of a much larger journey. Ready. As the pod doors sealed and the transport systems engaged, Caden felt the weight of the decision he had made to be part of something that might transform the world, for better or worse. There would be dangers ahead, resistance from those who feared change or coveted power, challenges he couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in his life, Caden wasn't just surviving. He was moving towards something meaningful, something that mattered beyond himself. The buried crate had contained more than ancient technology or biological marvels. It had contained a purpose, a connection to both past and future. a chance to be part of a story larger than his own. The transport pod accelerated, carrying them away from the hidden facility and toward the uncertain future that awaited. Behind them, beneath the endless desert, the preservation network continued its awakening, systems that had slumbered for centuries humming with renewed life and purpose. And ahead, the world waited, unaware of the changes that were coming, changes that would begin with a scavenger who had chosen to listen when a voice whispered from a buried crate, "Please, don't open,